Hello everyone. This is going to be a re-recording of the video I posted on Monday because for whatever reason the program I was using was incredibly unreliable. For the same 4 sections I used the same program and for whatever reason it just didn't work. It worked differently in each of them. So I'm going to re-record the first 3 sections here. Our first section we're going to title the Beaver Creek Pottery Company. And this is a very basic example. Section 1 is a 2 decision variable, 2 constraint problem. It's a problem we've done again and again, but also a problem you might see in the future. So I want to make sure everybody's very clear right now before we proceed. So when we're setting up our problem, very simply, first, we enter products. We want to indicate what we're doing. Oh, even before that, we should expand our columns just for simplicity's sake. So let's do that now. One more, and let's continue. So the first thing we're going to do is list the 2 products we're making. The first is bowls, the second is mugs. This is going back to the very first linear programming example we solved. So if we look over here, first thing we're going to do is in this situation, we're trying to find profit. So we indicate profit, and then under bowls, we indicate that it's $40. $40 for every bowl we produce, and $50 under mugs. $50 for every mug we produce. After that, right here, we're going to indicate our resources. As I said before, we have only 2 constraints or 2 resources in this problem. So the first resource is labor, and the second is a specialized clay used by the Native American group in this problem. Once we've done that, we continue setting up our problem with usage, which is how much clay and how much labor we're actually going to use. Constraint, and this is just for viewing simplicity. And finally, available, which is the total amount we have available. In this situation, we then move on down here, and this is the same as the fourth. A4 is exactly the same as A9. And we have to indicate our products, bowls, and mugs. Finally, our total profit. Sorry, this isn't profit, that's my mistake, this is products. So now, we've essentially set up the question the way we need it to be set up to allow the solver to eventually compute how many bowls and how many mugs we'll produce. So let's begin entering the valid information that we have. We know from the problem listed that we have 40 hours of labor and 40 hours of labor and 120 hours or kilograms or pounds of clay. Because it's a maximization, we want to use as much as possible. So this must be less than or equal to, less than or equal to. From the problem, we know in terms of labor, the first one, bowls, uses 1 hour of labor per bowl. Mugs is 2 hours of labor per mug to produce one. That's what we've indicated here. In terms of clay, it's similar. We have 4 units of clay to produce 1 bowl and 3 units of clay to produce 1 mug. Now we've entered all of the relevant data given to us by the question. Now it's up to us to enter the appropriate equations where necessary. The first equation that we're going to enter is usage. So we begin with an equal sign, as always in Excel. And to determine how many we use, we have to know how much labor goes into 1 mug times the total of mugs, how much labor goes into 1 bowl times the number of bowls we'll produce. That's the total labor we're going to use for bowls. But we also have to add the total labor per mug times the total number of mugs we will produce down here. That's what we've indicated here. B6 times B11 is the total labor for bowls. C6 times B11 is the total labor for mugs. We hit enter, and right now it will be 0 because we haven't produced any bowls or any mugs. We repeat that process here. So we want to know how much labor to produce a bowl, or how much clay to produce a bowl, times the total number of bowls we'll produce, plus how much labor or how much clay to produce a mug, times the total of mugs we will produce. And again, it will be 0 now because we're not yet producing any mugs. So our usage equations are now complete. Our next step is we have to enter our total profit equation, which is the profit we generate for one bowl times the total number of bowls, plus the profit we generate for a mug times the total of number of mugs we produce. So what we've done here so far is we've seen that we're producing bowls and mugs. That's what the computer is going to tell us, how many we produce of each. Once we know how many we produce of each, we can figure out how much labor we're going to use and how much clay we're going to use. Once we know how many we're going to produce of each, we can figure out our total profit based on how much profit we make for both. Right now it will be 0 again because we haven't produced any. Now, as always, we're going to go to our solver function. Now the solver essentially is used to determine two things and two things only: how many bowls and how many mugs we will produce. That's what we're using solver for. So we click on data, we open our solver window, and that's what we have here. So the first one, set objective, is we're entering the cell that will determine our ultimate goal. In this situation, our ultimate goal is total profit. It's a maximization. We know that from the question. And down here, which cells are we trying to compute? And I just said we're using solver to figure out one thing. And what we're using solver for is to figure out how many bowls and how many mugs we're going to produce. So that's essentially what we've indicated here: how many bowls and how many mugs. So that's where we enter that valid information. So we make this simplex LP. Now if we hit solve right now, what will happen is nothing, because we have not entered any limitations, any constraints. If we're trying to maximize profit and we haven't entered any constraints, then quite simply, in that scenario, our total profit would be infinity, because we would produce infinite bowls and infinite mugs. That's not real life. In real life, we have limitations. So let's go in and add our two constraints. Our first constraint is that the total labor we use, D6, must be less than or equal to the total labor we have available, F6. So we add that. And again, in terms of clay, we see the total usage of clay must be less than or equal to the total clay available. We've now entered our two constraints. So what we're doing here is we're going to hit solve, and what the computer will do is it will run every possible permutation of bowls and mugs. And it will, for each one, it will calculate, is this producing more profit? If yes, continue. And it will continue until it reaches our constraints. Once it reaches our constraints, it will look at the total profit being produced, and it will determine that this is the maximum profit possible. So we hit solve. All constraints and optimality conditions are satisfied, meaning we have maximized our profit, optimality condition is satisfied, and all constraints are satisfied. We hit OK, and we see that we are producing 24 bowls and 8 mugs, which will give us a profit of $1,368. If bowls generate $40 in profit and mugs generate $50 in profit, and we know it's 1 hour for bowl and 2 hours for mug for labor, 4 units of clay, 3 units of clay in terms of clay. This is our ideal production scenario. And this is the most possible money we can make under these conditions. Hopefully everyone is clear. And I'll see you in section 2. Thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back. In this section, we're going to go over the second question. In the video that I uploaded on Monday, there were no problems with the second question, except the solver, for whatever reason, didn't show. Now, because it's difficult to juggle between the two videos, I'm going to re-record this entire process. This second question is similar to what we did in section 1, but the major difference in this scenario is instead of 2 constraints, we're now going to have 5 constraints. We still have 2 decision variables, meaning we're still choosing between 2 products, but in this situation, we have 5 limitations. There are going to be 5 different things that will dictate how and what we can produce. So let's begin. First thing, as always, we're going to expand our columns. Okay, so in this section, we're going to title it the Valley Wine Example. And as we mentioned, we're going to produce 2 products. The first is nectar wine, the second is red wine. Now, it's a maximization. We're trying to maximize profit. So the first thing we have to do is indicate exactly how much profit we're deriving from each batch of each wine. For nectar, it's $9,000. For red wine, it's $12,000. Once we've done that, we want to outline the products we're producing, or the resources we're using, or the constraints restraining us. The first is grapes. We have a limited number of grapes. The second, storage space. We have a limited amount of storage space. The third, time. We have a limited amount of time. And the last 2 are based on demand. The first is how much nectar we can actually sell, how much is demanded. And the second is how much red is demanded. Once we've entered that information, we'll come over here and we're going to write in usage. And that's how much ultimately of each resource we will be using or producing in terms of demand. Then we add in constraint, so it's easier to follow along, and our total available for each resource. We can enter that data very quickly. Grapes, we have 64 tons, storage space 50 cubic units, time 120 hours, and there are 7 batches of each wine that we are demanding. Because it's a maximization, all of these in this scenario are less than or equal to, because we do not have more than those resources. We cannot produce more than what is demanded. We come down here, we highlight our products, nectar, red wine, and our ultimate goal is to determine profit. Before we can enter our valid formulae, we need to enter how many grapes does it take to make a batch of nectar? And the answer is 4 tons. For a batch of red, it's 8 tons. Both nectar and red wine require 5 units of cubic space to store. A batch of nectar requires 15 hours to produce, and a batch of red requires 8 hours to produce. Now, in this situation, because we're looking at demand, we want to know how many total we're producing. So we make this 1 and 0, 0 and 1. All of the relevant information has now been added. The next step is we have to calculate our actual usage. And how do you calculate usage of grapes? Very simply, it is the amount of grapes per nectar times the total of nectar that we make, plus the amount of grapes per red times the total amount of red that we make. And then we repeat that 5 more times. There we go. We repeat again. So it's the total of storage space per nectar times the nectar plus the total amount per red times the red we produce. The total amount per nectar times the total amount of nectar plus the total amount per red times the total amount of red we produce. The total amount of nectar times the total nectar we produce plus total amount per red times the red we produce. And one final time, total amount per red times per nectar times the nectar we produce plus total amount per red times the red we produce. So our usage formula are correct. We have one more formula, and that's our total profit. And that's the amount of money we make per nectar times total nectar plus total amount per red times total red. Once we've entered all that data, we click on the solver function, and the solver is going to tell us how much nectar and how much red we should ideally produce. So the first one, we're trying to determine total profit, which is B15. We're changing to maximization. We're changing 2 cells, 13 and 14. That's the computer is going to figure out how much nectar and how much red to produce. We're going to make it simplex LP as always, because we want it to be a linear function. And then we add in our 5 constraints here. The first one is very simply, the total usage must be less than or equal to the total available, D6 and F6. The total of storage space used must be less than or equal to storage space available, D7, F7. The total of time available used must be less than or equal to the time available. The total demand must be less than or equal to demand that is the maximum demand, E9, F9. And finally, the total demand for red must be less than or equal to how much red is demanded. We hit OK. We've entered what we're looking for. We entered the cells that the computer is going to experiment with, and we've entered our limitations beyond which we cannot manufacture. So we hit solve. All constraints and optimality conditions are satisfied. We're going to keep the solver solution, and we found that nectar, we require we should make 4 units of nectar, we should make 6 units of red, and that will allow us to maximize our profit at $108,000. If we differentiate at all, we would be decreasing our profit, or we would be exceeding one of our constraints. This is our ideal situation. Thank you. This is the end of section 2. Okay, everyone, welcome back to section 3. In this section, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a situation where instead of 2 decision variables, we're now going to move to 4 decision variables. We're going to remain with 5 constraints, but instead of choosing between 2 products to manufacture, this time we'll be looking at 10 products to manufacture. The big difference is, as we get closer and closer to real life, the more we see that scenarios like this exist, where we're choosing not between 1 good or 2 goods, but between many goods. So in this scenario, we're going to be choosing between sweatshirts and t-shirts, 2 of each. So as always, let's begin by expanding our columns. Okay, and we're going to make this the clothing example. The title's not really important, it's just for simplicity's sake. First thing we list, as always, is products. And as I mentioned, we don't have 2 products this time, we have 4. So the first is sweatshirt with the logo on the front. The second, sweatshirt with the logo on the front and back. Third is t-shirt, the logo on the front. And the fourth is t-shirt, logo on the front and back. Once we've entered that information, we have to indicate what profit we generate from each product, because that's what we're ultimately trying to determine in this question. And in this situation, it's very easy to see from the question that's given to us, it's $90, $125, $45, $65. Once we've done that, we have to include our resources or constraints. We'll expand this column a little bit just for ease. We see in this situation, I told you we're going to remain with 5 constraints. So the first one is processing time, how long it takes to make each sweater or t-shirt. Second is shipping. How much space do we have to ship our products? Third is budget. How much will it cost us to make each product? The fourth is demand, and that's in terms of sweatshirts. There's a maximum demand. And the last one, sweatshirts for t-shirts. Again, we have a maximum demand. Continuing on, we come over here and we write in usage, constraints, and what we have available. From the question, we see that constraints, or because it's a maximization, these must all be less than or equal to the maximum amount of resources or demand that exists. And again, from the question, we see that the maximum amount of time to manufacture is 72 hours. The total shipping space we have to ship our products is 1,200 units of space. We have $25,000 for our project. We have 500 sweatshirts total, front and back, or just front, demanded, plus 500 units of t-shirts, logo on the front or logo on the front and back, demanded. Now, before we enter the information, we'll come down here, we'll say products, sweat, front, sweat, front, back, T, front, T, front, back. And we're trying to ultimately determine our profit. So we've entered most of the valid information, but we have some more information given to us in the question. That's what we're going to enter here. First is processing time. So we see that a t-shirt takes 10% of an hour, a sweatshirt with sweatshirt with the front, 10% of an hour, sweatshirt front and back is 2.5% of an hour, a t-shirt is 8% of an hour, and a t-shirt with the front and back is 21% of an hour. Shipping, sweatshirts require 3 units of space each, t-shirts require 1 unit of space each. In terms of manufacturing, $36, sweatshirt with the logo on the front, $48, sweatshirt with the logo on the front and back, $25 with the logo on the front, and $35 if the logo is on the front and the back of a t-shirt. We know the demand, and so now we have all of the relevant information entered. There are only one step remaining on the actual spreadsheet. We have to enter the critical formula, the formulas that will allow the solver to compute the relevant data. So we begin here. To figure out how much time we're using in total, we want the time per sweatshirt with the logo on the front times the total of products we manufacture like that, plus total time per logo on the front and the back times the total of number of sweatshirts with the logo on the front and the back, plus the total t-shirts with the logo on the front times the total number of t-shirts with the logo on the front, plus the total time for t-shirts with the logo on the front and the back times the total number of t-shirts with the logo on the front and the back. So it's t-shirt, sweatshirt front times number of sweatshirts front. Sweatshirts front and back times total number of sweatshirts manufactured front and back. T-shirts front times the total number of t-shirts with the logo on the front. T-shirts front and back times the total number of t-shirts with the logo on the front and the back. Right now it's 0 because we haven't manufactured any yet. We repeat, please be patient with me. And here we've indicated how much shipping will be used depending on how many t-shirts and sweatshirts we make, times the number of sweatshirts and t-shirts we make. Again, we repeat, please be patient. And again, this time we'll leave it only to 2 because the zeros don't really matter. And again, leaving it to 2 because the zeros don't really matter for sweatshirts. So we've entered all 5 of our usage formulas. The last thing we need to do is enter our profit function, and we do that by computing all 4 of the product profits times the total number of goods we manufacture of each. So once we've entered that, again, we haven't manufactured anything, so the total remains at 0. Now, as always, we click on our data solver function, and we enter a little more complicated, but essentially the same thing. The first one is, what is our final objective? As before, it's to calculate profit. We know it's a maximization. What is different this time? And what the computer is doing is it's comparing, or it's trying different options of manufacturing. It's looking at different manufacturing choices. Before, we had only two possibilities. So there were only two cells that might possibly change. In this situation, we have four cells that could change. So we enter here B13, B14, B15, and B16. In this situation, that's what the computer is going to try different possibilities of. So, as before, we make it simplex LP, and we have to add our 5 variables. The first one, total time, must be less than or equal to actual available time. Total shipping must be less than or equal to available shipping space. Total budget must be less than or equal to the actual budget we have. Total demand must be less than or equal to what is demanded. And finally, total demand for t-shirts must be less than or equal to actual demand for t-shirts. We hit OK. We have our 5 variables. We know we're looking at profit. We're changing, the computer is trying different possibilities of sweatshirt front back, t-shirt front back, which is cells B13, B14, B15, and B16. So we hit solve. All our constraints and optimality conditions are satisfied. We've successfully come to the maximum profit available if all of these limitations exist and if those are the correct prices. So we see that we're not manufacturing any sweatshirts with the logo only on the front. We're only manufacturing 298.25 sweatshirts with the logo on both the front and the back. We're also not manufacturing any t-shirts with the logo on the front only. We're manufacturing 305 t-shirts with the logo on the front and the back. So our total profit, if we manufacture this, will be $57,122.81. This is our ideal manufacturing choice. If we manufacture less or more of anything that we've indicated, we're either reducing our maximum profit or we are violating one of our constraints. Hopefully everybody's very clear on this. This is the end of section 3. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, good morning everyone. Yesterday, when our video was finally released from YouTube Purgatory, we had a scenario where the program or the screen recording program I was using worked fine with Excel, but for some reason it didn't work with QM, and I'm not sure why. So what I've done is I've downloaded a second example or second screen recording program, and I'm going to run through our section 4 again. In this section, now just to quickly review, in section 1, we looked at a two decision variable, two constraint problem. In section 2, we moved on to a different scenario, and in section 2, it was a 2 decision variable, 5 constraint problem. And the reason we did that is it's getting a little closer to real life. Now in section 3, we expanded again. We went with 4 decision variables and 5 constraints. Now here, in this section, now I've done it with, or I'm going to do it with QM. It is also possible, following the basic principles, to use it in Excel. And after I do this, I will upload a homework problem to our group chat, hopefully for you to try before our final exam on Friday. So this will be an example with not 1, not 2, not 3 or 4, but 10 decision variables. Essentially, what we will be doing is we are acting as dietitians, and we have to ensure that among our 10 different breakfast choices, our clients receive all of the nutrients they require while at the same time minimizing cost. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, it's not using QM, it's not a very complicated process. However, because we have 10 different decision variables, and also we have 7 different constraints, it is a little time consuming. So as I proceed through this, there will be some dead air, but hopefully if you're watching the video, it should be relatively easy to follow along. So please, there is a lot of data to enter, so while I'm entering it, please try to be patient. So let's begin. As I said, this is a diet example. So as always, we click on Module, down to Linear Programming, and we're going to launch a new problem. We'll call it our diet example. Let's keep things simple. Now, as I mentioned, we have not 1, 2, but 7 actual constraints. And we'll name all of those later. I also mentioned that we're trying to minimize our costs while still meeting dietary requirements. But we do have 10 different choices in terms of our decision variables, 10 different possible breakfast choices. None of this constraint 1, 2, 3 is important in this scenario. So once we've set everything up like this, we can move to the next level. So we hit OK, and we have this relatively complex board. But let's see if we can make it a little simpler by adding some titles in. Please be patient while I enter the titles. Okay, I've entered all my titles here. Essentially, I've listed all 10 possible breakfast choices, from bran cereal to oatmeal, eggs, orange juice, and wheat toast. All of the 10 possible options. And as I said, we're trying to minimize costs. So now, for each of them, we have to enter our costs. So please bear with me while I do that. Okay, So what I've done for each of the 10 items is I've entered a cost. Now the key here is just to be careful, because when you're entering this many data figures, it can be easy to make a small mistake here or a small mistake there. The actual numbers are pretty straightforward, but entering them in can be time consuming. It might also, in this scenario, be a little bit confusing because we have so many. So what we're going to do now is we're going to enter our constraints. We've entered our decision variables. We've entered our costs. But we do have, as I said, 7 different constraints. Okay, here are our constraints. Now it's going to be a little different in this situation because some of these items are a good thing, others are not. So some of them, like iron and calcium, we want to ensure there's a minimum amount. But others like fat and cholesterol, we want a maximum amount because they're not healthy products. So let's do calories first. Calories we don't want more than because we're trying to be healthy. So we want less than or equal to a maximum of 420 calories. Fat also will be less than or equal to a total of 20 grams of fat. And finally, our last negative quality, less than or equal to 30 milligrams of cholesterol. So these are all negative aspects, but iron, calcium, protein, and fiber are positive. So we want them to be greater than or equal to. And the first one, so what we've done here is we've entered our maximum of fat, calories, and cholesterol, but also our minimum of iron, calcium, protein, and fiber. Now the reason, as I said, the reason some of them are good and some of them are bad is very simply because some things we require, other things we want to limit. So let's go in and calories. First we're going to look at our calorie count. And again, all this data was presented to us in a table format. So if you're watching, it's not overly tricky, just like the question you'll have to do today. Oh, my mistake. Okay, so we've entered our calories. Next, we want to enter our fat content. Some of them will have fat, others might not. And if it doesn't have any fat in it, we simply leave it at 0 in the table. We've done the same thing here. Now please bear with me because again, this is a lot of data entry, but I'll continue. So we've moved past our negatives and we're moving into our positive items. So first we'll start with iron. Calcium. Protein. Nope. One small mistake. And in our final section, fiber. So the key here is all we've really done is entered the data given to us into this convenient format presented to us in QM for Windows. Okay, so we've taken all of the information given to us. We've now entered it into the data. And as we saw before, using QM for some examples is very, very, very easy, like this scenario. So all we're going to do now is hit solve. And what we found here is we have bran cereal, milk, and wheat toast. Assuming we stick only to these three items, we're going to meet our daily requirements. We're going to be above what we require, and we're also going to minimize our cost at only 49 cents. So we have 0.23 cups of bran cereal, 1.21 glasses of milk, and 3.62 pieces of wheat toast. That's what we've seen here. And that will give us a minimal cost of 49 cents. That's all we've done is solve this situation now. So in that scenario, assuming all this information is correct, then this is our minimized dietary example. Hopefully this is clear. I'm going to upload the data to YouTube. I'm going to upload this video to YouTube, and I'll also present you with a homework question similar to this that you can practice on. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to call me or to message me, and we can go from there. Thank you very much, everyone. Sorry about the delay with the video. I had no idea my other program could not handle QM. Bye-bye.